Life is full of ups and downs. One moment we're very happy, we're very elated about what's happening, and then the next we can feel like there's no hope in sight. So, with these ups and downs, they determine how we feel generally. Now, if we want to learn how to think better and feel better in our everyday life, we have to be able to manage all of the ups and downs, not just the downs, but also the highs. Because with a high, there is a great fall that usually follows it. To think better simply means to be able to manage what life throws at you, because life will always throw something at you, whether you're expecting it or you're not. In order to manage all of your emotions and your ideas in your everyday life, it's not about anticipating what's going to happen. Rather, be in a state where you can always be at peace or be at equilibrium no matter what happens around you. To illustrate how to manage your ups and downs in life, I'm going to share with you an old story. And the point of this story is to illustrate how to manage what comes at you, because we ultimately don't know what things mean all the time when they come into our life. This story is called The Chinese Farmer, or the Maybe story, and it goes as follows. Once upon a time, there was a Chinese farmer whose horse ran away. And that evening, all of his neighbors came around, and they said, "We're so sorry to hear your horse has run away. This is most unfortunate." And all the farmer said was, "Maybe." The next day, the horse came back, bringing 7 wild horses with it. And in the evening, everybody came back and said, "Oh, isn't that lucky? What a great turn of events. You now have 8 horses." And the farmer replied again and said, "Maybe." The following day, his son tried to break one of the horses while riding it. He was thrown and broke his leg. And the neighbors then said, "Oh man, that's so bad." And the farmer responded, "Maybe." The next day, the conscription officers came around to conscript people into the army, and they rejected his son because he had broken his leg. Again, all the neighbors came around and said, "Oh, what great news, isn't that great?" And again, the farmer said, "Maybe." So with this story of the Chinese farmer, it's simply illustrating how he managed all the things happening to him. He was very indifferent almost to the things happening, and everything that happened served its own purpose, and it didn't allow him to feel any kind of way and throw him for a loop. There was no up and down. There was simply him saying maybe, which is representative of him not letting his outside circumstances determine how he actually feels. It's not to say that you're not supposed to care about what happens outside of you. It's more like you shouldn't let things affect you mentally to the degree where you cannot think and you feel so overwhelmed and so stressed out where you're just frozen. You want to reach a point where things happen and then you see them happening and you can still move on with your life. As we see things happening to us, we get overwhelmed with these thoughts and they take control of everything. So essentially what is happening is our mind is being hijacked by thoughts and feelings because we think, "Oh man, this terrible thing just happened. I don't know what to do." And we start thinking and overthinking, but there is so many variables when it comes to life, especially when things happen externally. We don't know what's going to happen ultimately. Something bad can ultimately be something good for us, and something perceived as good can ultimately be bad for us. So this generally shows how we feel and think is always dependent on things that happen outside of us. Typically, how we think and feel is not our direct choice or the way that we would like to react to things. We are simply reacting to the things happening around us, and depending on how we interpret them, this will determine who we are, what we feel, and what we believe. So if everything that happens around us is determining who we are, then essentially our environment determines who we are. We don't have any say in who we are for ourselves. And this is what I want to help people with when it comes to thinking better. Because to think that your life is dependent on your surroundings and your outside means that life isn't fair. It just means that people who have good things that happen outside of them have a better life and can think better, and they are just more blessed than everybody else. Life is on an even playing field, where you can choose, even if something good or something bad is happening outside of you, you can determine how you think, and you can always think better despite what's happening. The whole process of what happens in our life is very complex. It's very hard to determine whether something is going to be good or bad, but what we can determine is how we interpret what happens. And when we reach a place where we're at equilibrium, when we're always at peace, it doesn't matter what actually happens because we're always in a place where we are comfortable mentally and a place where we can always think better about what is happening. So, in any of these scenarios, in any of these situations, we may hear bad news in our life. When you experience something bad happen to you, it can actually save you from something in the future. Or when something good that is perceived happens, this can lead to something bad happening in the future. We just don't know. There's too many variables, and instead of trying to label what is good and bad, we just have to see how things play out. So sometimes it can happen like this in our modern day life. Maybe you want to be with somebody that you had your eye on, and you want to be with them. And then you perceive being with them as being a good thing. You're with the girl of your dreams, for example. And then what happens is this person ends up being very toxic and ruins your self-esteem, and it's the worst relationship you ever had. So something that was perceived as good or really high up led to a very hard downfall. So now you're at rock bottom when everything goes bad. Maybe you received some bad news that you were fired from your job, and this can be considered something bad as well. But what can happen is you can find an even better job than you had previously. There's just no way of knowing. And so this piece of information can be perceived as something that is very negative or very bad. We must always be in a place mentally where we can be at ease, at equilibrium, just turning every situation into one that benefits us or a good situation. So now I will illustrate this using a line and using an up and down, kind of like a wave pattern. And you'll see that at the top, this is the high that we reach in our life. But again, as we reach these highs, there's immediately after the high, just like a roller coaster, it must come down. And then as it comes down, it usually goes all the way down to the bottom. And then once it goes to the bottom, it has to go back up. And this is why we perceive many times life having these ups and downs, because we're always on this pendulum swing where when the pendulum goes one way, it goes all the way back the other one. And this is just the way it goes. There's like an infinite rhythm that happens in and out, or the pendulum swing, the up and down. And everything works like this. In order to escape this pendulum swing, we have to be in the middle of that line, the equilibrium, where the up and the down meet, where you're just there on this straight line. And this is the place of peace. Mastering this state of mind is thinking better. It's about no matter what happens to you, you'll always be fine, you'll always be okay. Because you can turn any situation that comes at you and you can transform it into one that benefits you. Because no matter what happens itself outside of you, you can always perceive it in a better way or a good way. Rather than see everything as good or bad, it is things that simply happen and then you attach a good interpretation on it, one that benefits you, one that will not affect you too much and will make you feel very bad or make you feel very uncomfortable. Thinking better in your everyday life doesn't mean that you have to be very ecstatic or very over the moon and be so excited and so happy. It just means that you have to be at ease, and that's it. To master our minds simply means to master the way that we think, not the things that happen outside of us, because we can't always control what happens outside of us. The whole idea is to master the processes that happen inside of our own minds, our ideas, our feelings, and our beliefs. It's not up to us to determine what happens outside of us, to try to control what happens outside of us. Because when we enter too much into this realm, this is how we reach those states of depression, anxiety, lack of purpose, because we're always trying to change everything outside. And then this is how many people enter into manipulation and enter into controlling others, because we're always focusing on controlling outside of us. So this means controlling our environment and controlling people as well. So it enters into that realm of controlling others, manipulation, lying, deceiving. And this is how that happens. So in order to avoid all of this and avoiding all of this extra mental work that you have to put in controlling your environment, controlling people, all you got to do is change the way that you perceive the things that happen outside of you. Not to control the things outside of you, but just change how you react towards them themselves. The way that we think is also largely dependent on our past experiences. If we have experienced many bad things in the past, then we have to get rid of that. Because what we usually do is bring up the past into our present moment and then make this into our future. So we're always anticipating what happened in the past into our future. So let's say that we always have very bad experiences when it comes to getting a job, for example. We'll always apply this into getting a job. And so this will express itself outwardly as we try to accomplish getting a new job. So then we always put ourselves down and make ourselves look worse when we go to interviews and when we do things of this nature. If you had a particularly rough childhood or a very hard past in some kind of way, this will also make its way into your present state and in your future because you're constantly bringing it back. You're going back into that time and bringing back the pain and bringing it into your current experience, which is why it's so important to let those things be in the past as you make yourself better now and in the future. Because who you are currently, right now, determines who you will be tomorrow. But if you constantly bring the past up and bring it into your present state, then your present state will determine who you are in the future. All there is this present moment. And if you can make this present moment very steady, very even, at peace, at equilibrium, then you will be the person that you set out to be once you define who that is for you as an individual. So don't beat yourself up anymore. Just take things as they come from the outside in a way where you can breathe. Don't be so overwhelmed by what happens outside of you. Take it one step at a time. And don't beat yourself up because things are happening outside of you. Don't beat yourself up because you're reacting in a way that you don't want to. Don't be mad at yourself when you get these intrusive thoughts. There's a lot of things we don't have control over. Sometimes we have intrusive thoughts that come from our past traumatic experiences, or things happening around us that we have no control over. Be very gentle with yourself and define who you would like to be. And you can only do this when you are at peace, when you can think. There is a better version of you that exists. And all we must do is cancel out everything that is happening around us and cancel out everything that has happened to us in the past and simply be that better person. And then we will become that person in the future as well.